Welcome back to the Fourth Way Podcast. Purity of heart is to will one thing. Chapter 12. What then must I do? The listener's role in a devotional address. My listener, this talk was brought forth upon the occasion of the office of confession. If after the opening references to this occasion no more has been said of it, yet it has never been forgotten in the talk. For what has been given is most intimately connected with what is appropriate to an address of invitation to such an occasion. From its single point of departure, to will one thing, the talk has moved out in different directions, ever returning, however, to this point of departure. It has at the same time scanned the earth, making note of human differences. From time to time it has depicted the individual error and the state of soul of one who has lost his way. This has been done on a magnified scale, so that man may the better become aware of, and look out for, what in the trivial circumstances of daily life so rarely appears unmixed that it is much harder to detect than are these instances that are writ large. As it has proceeded, the talk, holding tenaciously to the demand, to will one thing, has taught how to recognize many errors, disappointments, deceptions, and self-deceptions. It has striven to track down double-mindedness into its hidden ways, and to ferret out its secret. By striving at every possible point to make itself intelligible, the talk has sought to bring these things within the reach of each listener. But the intelligibility of the talk, and the listener's understanding of it, are still not the talk's true aim. This by no means gives the meditation its proper emphasis. For in order to achieve its proper emphasis, the talk must unequivocally demand something of the listener. It must demand not merely what has previously been requested, that the reader should share in the work with the speaker. Now the talk must unconditionally demand the reader's own decisive activity, and all depends on this. So, my listener, turn your attention now to the occasion, while consciousness of sin sharpens the need until it becomes the one thing necessary, while the earnestness of this holy place strengthens the will in holy determination, while the all-knowing one's presence makes self-deception impossible. Consider your own life. The talk which is without authority will not have the presumption to pass judgment upon you. By vigorously pondering the occasion, you will stand before a higher judge, where no man dares judge another, since he himself is one of the accused. The talk does not address itself to you, as if to a particular designated person, for it does not know who you are. But if you weigh the occasion vigorously, then it will be to you, whoever you may be, it will be as if it spoke precisely to you. This is not due to any merit in the talk. It is the product of your own activity, that for your own sake the talk is helpful to you. And it will be because of your own activity that you will be the one to whom the intimate thou is spoken. This is your own activity. It really is. Alas, above all, let us not be drawn away from the decision by any attention to the speaker and the artistry of the talk. If this happens, then busyness and double-mindedness are again to blame, that the emphasis in the composition is wrongly placed. In this case, the devotional speaker is admired for his art, his eloquence, while that decision of which each man is capable, and that which it may be well to note, is the highest thing of all, is completely ignored. In a devotional sense, to be eloquent is a mere frill in the same way that to be beautiful is a happy privilege, but is still a non-essential frill. In a devotional sense, earnestness, to listen in order to act, this is the highest thing of all, and God be praised, every man is capable of it if he so wills. Yet busyness places its most weighty emphasis upon the frills, the capacity to please, and looks upon earnestness as nothing at all. In a contemptuous and frivolous fashion, busyness thinks that to be eloquent is the highest thing of all, and that the task of the listener is to pass judgment on whether the speaker has this gift. In order that no irregularity may be admitted, or no double-mindedness left unmentioned, let me then at this point, where the demand is being made for a person's own activity, briefly illustrate the relation between the speaker and the listener in a devotional address. Let me, in order once again to take up arms against double-mindedness, make this illustration by borrowing a picture from worldly art. And do not let the two senses in which this may be taken disturb you, or give you grounds for accusing the address of impropriety. For if you have dared to attend an exhibition of worldly art, then by doing this you yourself must have come to understand what is meant by spiritual. Therefore, you must have considered the spiritual with the worldly art, even though it was the means of your first distinct recognition of the difference between the two. If you did not, discord and double-mindedness are in your own heart, so that you live for periods of time on the worldly plane with only an occasional thought of the spiritual. It is so on the stage, as you know well enough, that someone sits and prompts by whispers. He is the inconspicuous one. He is, and wishes to be, overlooked. But then there's another. He strides out prominently. He draws every eye to himself. And for that reason, he has been given his name. That is, actor. He impersonates a distinct individual. In the skillful sense of this illusory art, each word becomes true when embodied in him, true through him, and yet he is told what he shall say by the hidden one that sits and whispers. No one is so foolish as to regard the prompter as more important than the actor. Now forget this light talk about art. Alas, in regard to things spiritual, the foolishness of many is this, that they, in the secular sense, look upon the speaker as an actor, and the listeners as theater-goers who are to pass judgment upon this artist. But the speaker is not the actor, not in the remotest sense. No, the speaker is the prompter. There are no mere theater-goers present, for each listener will be looking into his own heart. The stage is eternity, and the listener, if he is the true listener, and if he is not, he is at fault, stands before God during the talk. The prompter whispers to the actor what he is to say, but the actor's repetition of it is the main concern, is the solemn charm of the art. The speaker whispers the word to the listeners, but the main concern is earnestness, that the listeners, by themselves, with themselves, and to themselves, in the silence before God, may speak with the help of this address. The address is not given for the speaker's sake, in order that men may praise or blame him. The listener's repetition of it is what is aimed at. If the speaker has the responsibility for what he whispers, then the listener has an equally great responsibility not to fall short in his task. In the theater, the play is staged before an audience who are called theater-goers. But at the devotional address, God himself is present. In the most earnest sense, God is the critical theater-goer, who looks on to see how the lines are spoken and how they are listened to. Hence here the customary audience is wanting. The speaker is then the prompter, and the listener stands openly before God. The listener, if I may say so, is the actor, who in all truth acts before God. Oh, let us never forget this. Let us not reduce the spiritual to the worldly. Even though we may earnestly think of the spiritual and the worldly together, let us forever distinguish between them. As soon as the spiritual is looked upon in worldly fashion, an observation for which one has the same foolishness to thank as that which would look upon the prompter in a play as more important than the actor, then the speaker becomes an actor, and the listeners become critical theater-goers. In the same way, from the secular point of view, the devotional address is simply held for a group of attenders, and God is no more present than he is in the theater. God's presence is the decisive thing that changes all. As soon as God is present, each man in the presence of God has the task of paying attention to himself. The speaker must see that during the address he pays attention to himself, to what he says. The listener, that during the address he pays attention to himself, to how he listens, and whether during the address he, in his inner self, secretly talks with God. If this were not done, then the listeners would be presuming to share God's task with him. God and the listeners together would watch the speaker and pass judgment upon him. So it is with the true relationship of speaker and listener in a devotional address. Or to put it in another way, it is as if a subordinate functionary of the church, who is without authority, should read aloud the prescribed prayer. Properly speaking, it is not the church functionary who prays, The one who prays is the listener who sits in the church and opens himself to God while he listens to the reading of the prayer. Yet the listener does not speak. His voice is not heard, nor does he pray softly to himself. But silently and with his heart, he is praying in the presence of God by means of the audible voice of the one who reads out the prayer and whispers to him what he shall say. Yet this is not earnestness, that one man shall tell another or dictate to another what he shall say. But this is earnestness, that the other man now should tell it to God, speaking for himself. Now we have come to a clear understanding about this. The demand will only be repeated in order that the speaker may focus his mind actively upon the occasion of the address. The talk asks you then, or you ask yourself by means of the talk, what kind of life do you live? Do you will only one thing? And what is this one thing? The talk does not expect that you will name off any goal that only pretends to be one thing, for it does not intend to address itself to anyone with whom it would not be able to deal seriously, for the reason that such a man has cut himself off from any earnest consideration of the occasion of the address. There is still another reason. A man can, to be sure, have an extremely different, yes, have a precisely opposite opinion from ours, and one can nevertheless deal earnestly with him if one assumes that finally there may be a point of agreement, a unity in some universal human sense, call it what you will. But if he is mad, then one cannot deal with him, for he shies away from just the final point, in which one at last may hope to find agreement with him. One can dispute with a man, dispute to the furthest limit, as long as one assumes that in the end there is a point in common, an agreement in some universal human sense, in self-respect. But when, in his worldly strivings, he sets out like a madman in a desperate attempt to despise himself, and in the face of this is brazen about it and lauds himself for his infamy, then one can undertake no disputing with him, for like a madman, and even more terribly, he shies away from this final thing, self-respect, in which one might at last hope to find agreement with him. The talk assumes, then, that you will the good, and asks you now what kind of life you live, whether or not you truthfully will only one thing. It does not ask inquisitively about your calling in life, about the number of workers you employ, or about how many you have under you in your office, or if you happen to be in the service of the state. No, the talk is not inquisitive. It asks you above all else, it asks you first and foremost, whether you really live in such a way that you are capable of answering that question, in such a way that the question truthfully exists for you. Because, in order to be able earnestly to answer that serious question, a man must already have made a choice in life. He must have chosen the invisible, chosen that which is within. He must have lived so that he has hours and times in which he collects his mind, so that his life can win the transparency that is a condition for being able to put the question to himself, and for being able to answer it. If, of course, it is legitimate to demand that a man shall know whereof he speaks. To put such a question to the man that is so busy in his earthly work, and outside of this in joining the crowd in its noise-making, would be folly that would lead only to fresh folly through the answer. So this is the chapter where Kierkegaard ties his preface, the beautiful preface, which I absolutely love. He ties it back in here and kind of completes the analogy. Basically saying, if you remember the woman who created the tapestry to kind of, for the church to help bring people into worship, and Kierkegaard talks about how she puts her all into it, but that, if she makes some minor mistake due to ability or just, an error somehow, and somebody sees that mistake and focuses on the mistake instead of thinking about what that higher thing that it's calling the worshiper to, he said, then that fault is on the worshiper, and so the point isn't the tapestry that the woman makes, even though she's making it to help people enter the presence of God. The point's not the tapestry, the point's what that tapestry connects you to. And it would be easy for people with wrong attitudes or perspectives to completely miss the point, right? and focus on the wrong thing. Uh, and so here he is doing what Kierkegaard is famous for. Kierkegaard's existentialism um, is is very famous. Like he is known for being focused on the individual, and he talks against the crowd a lot. Like he hates the idea of the crowd, and you totally get it because he's in Denmark, and you've got the institutionalized church, and you have people who are just absolutely falling into line with terrible things and falling into this crowd mentality, and everybody's a cultural Christian there, and they're just doing I was born a Christian. This is just I was baptized into the church. I'm a Christian, and so Kierkegaard hates that. Like he says, no, individuals have to make choices for themselves. And a lot of people today, it seems like, take Kierkegaard too far, and there's this like utter focus on individualism, and uh, Bernard Eller has a really good work on this about Kierkegaard and discipleship, and he shows how Kierkegaard is very individual focused in terms of personal decision, but then he's very communal, or recognizes the importance of connection to a body in regard to like discipleship and stuff. And so I think Eller makes a great case. But what you need to understand is that Kierkegaard is fighting a very particular form of problem in his day, which is the crowd. And really, I mean, I think the crowd is probably not just a particular instantiation of a problem. I think it's a problem that recurs all the time. I mean, think about the Pharisees that killed Jesus, or Judas if he was a Sicarii, and he's part of that group, the Zealots or whatever. You've got lots of different crowds that say, no, you have to do things my way. Jesus, you have to be a zealot. Jesus, you can't undermine Israel or Israel's relationship with Rome, or power, like whatever group you are, a Sadducee, a Pharisee, an Essene, a Sicarii, a Zealot. Like they all have their crowds and their own ideas of what you can't compromise on. And so Kierkegaard here, he's like, no, the individual has to divorce themselves from the crowd. Like you are on the stage. And he gives a beautiful example, which I think is just it's so good. It kind of plays on top of the tapestry lady example. But he said, hey, look, right here, a lot of you're looking at the tapestry, which for him is this work. Purity of heart is to will one thing. You're looking at this book, and you're judging me based on my eloquence. Are my analogies amazing? Are my word choices perfect? Did I slip up in my argument in any way? He's like, that's not the point. Like I've presented something to you about your role as an individual and the decision that you need to make before God, and that's on you. Like you're the actor. And Kierkegaard likens himself to the like prompter. So today we have teleprompters, but back in the day, they might have had people who were kind of sitting behind the stage or in the front row, and they'd be able to prompt the actors on what to say. Like, hey, this is your line. And then the actor would act, right? They would repeat that line. And Kierkegaard's like, nobody would say that the prompter is the person on display, is the person who we're focused on. Because if the prompter gave the line, like that's just information. But it's on the actor to present that information lived out on the stage, right? In an accurate way, conveying emotion and application and all that kind of stuff, right? Because if the line is, I can't even think of a line right now, but if the line is like, "How dare you," and he's supposed to like swing his sword at somebody, right? The prompter just gives the verbal line, but that doesn't convey anything. That doesn't convey really all that much about the situation. It's on the actor to do that. And so Kierkegaard says, "Hey, I'm the prompter, right? I'm not the person who is on trial here. I'm not the person who's on display here. It's like I'm the prompter. You're the actor. Responsibility is on you, the individual, to to act on these words that I'm telling you. And you can discern those words, and you can figure out how you apply those words. But like, you stand on the stage before God. God is the audience. He's the critic. He's going to be the one who judges you. And so Kierkegaard, I wouldn't say he like washes his hands of it, but he's like, this is important, guys, right? I've done my part. Now your job is to not find that strand of thread that is off, and like and take your focus on the strand instead of on the worship. Your job is to take what I've given you and apply it. And so I think it's a beautiful analogy, and it's a sobering thing, right? Because to look at Kierkegaard's works and to try to judge him for saying things in just the right way is completely missing the point. And it's shifting responsibility from the individual to the prompter, to somebody else, when these are supposed to be mediums through which we are brought closer to God. So there's really a whole lot there we could get into, individualism, the crowd, existentialism, all kinds of things. But it was a pretty short chapter and a pretty straightforward one, and we've got just a couple more to go.
That's all for now. So peace, and because I'm a pacifist, when I say it, I mean it. This podcast is a part of the Kingdom Outpost Network. Please check out the links below to find other great podcasts and content related to nonviolence and kingdom living.